because we've never been taught these skills and we're insecure in our egos. We're frightened. So we want to jump in to shut the other person down. Otherwise, we're going to get triggered and we're going to go into the I'm about 4 and my big sister is getting something that I'm not getting.
Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe when you communicate better, you live better. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Chris, and I am a coach and therapist. And I work with purpose-driven leaders to manage difficult relationships and conversations. You'll notice that one of my co-hosts, Lucie, is not here today. It's because she's just busy. Unfortunately, we're going to miss her, but that's okay because we got a really cool conversation lined up for you. You know, as I mentioned, I'm also a therapist, so I do that work. And so I often connect with other people who are in the same space doing therapy and coaching. So it's cool to meld our worlds and see how we're making an impact on the people around us and how we just get people to communicate better at the end of the day. So today I'm excited because we're going to talk about how do you manage and navigate some of these difficult conversations and conflicts within relationships. How are you managing your own triggers? How are you listening well? And today I have with me a guest, a world-renowned psychotherapist and coach specializing in love and relationships, Heather Garbutt. She's on a mission with the goal of empowering 10 million people to create true, loving, and mutually supportive relationships. Heather, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
We're so happy to have you here. I know Lucie's sad that she's not able to be here, but just briefly, can you share with the audience kind of what you do and how do you do it?
I help people separate well from relationships so that they can learn and grow from them, so they don't make the same mistakes again, so they look after their kids if they have them from a sort of mutually respectful, co-parenting, cooperative point of view, so they don't do their kids damage, so it doesn't go through the next generations. And so they don't spend all the money they're going to need to create 2 homes on lawyers' fees. So that's the first part of what I do. My favourite part is calling in the one, which is to help people who are single to find true love. And I have great success with that. It's such a joy to be invited to weddings. It's wonderful.
That's awesome. And I think that's obviously the difference between a therapist and a coach, right? The therapist part of me would shudders to even think about being invited to a client's wedding. But the coach part of me says, that'd be great. It was a great relationship if we're that close. So it's definitely interesting. Let's dive into this because I think this is such an interesting melding of the work that we do on our podcast and the work that you do every day. When it comes to relationships, what I see a lot is the idea of trust and commitment to one another. And so what are your thoughts on kind of how people build trust and that process of being committed to one another?
Yeah, it's really important. I get people to call in their one, but quite often they're learning new relationship skills that they didn't have before. So I think, firstly, it's important to be mutually intentional. You work together on what you want your relationship to be like. So you've got a sort of common goal. If you want to be harmonious and work through things in a loving and respectful way, that's what your intention is. That's what you come to with warmth and commitment. And from that place, you can trust each other. For when the mess happens, girl, it always will, one way or another, even if it's just over the washing up or not shutting a door, putting the toothpaste lid on, those little triggers will always happen, which are small triggers for big emotions quite often. Then you're prepared. Okay, we can have a go at each other about this, or we can choose not to. We can choose to see, this is one of those patterns where we get into retaliation and wanting to get power over and win and lose and moral high ground and all of that from all of our insecurities. Or we can choose to say, hey, hang on a minute, we're doing it again. Should we just take a few moments? Let's calm down. I'm really sorry I said that. I'm really sorry I retaliated. That's where you want to be going. And from that point of view as well, the date night thing is really important, because that's where you keep addressing anything that comes up. That's where you keep your connection. That's where you keep reflecting and checking in. Is this still where we are? We said at the beginning of last year we wanted to have 3 holidays this year. We just had to spend a load of money redoing the kitchen because of a plumbing problem. Do we still want to go on the 3 holidays? I'm talking about it in very lumpy ways, but it could be about all sorts of other things. The things that undo people are those little things and also the big stresses. So things around money, health, family, work, career, spirituality. You can all have the odd emotional crisis. Those are the big triggers that undo people.
There's so much to unpack. I want to dive into like everything. We could spend like 8 hours just talking about each one of those things. And let me go back. Let's go in chronological order of what you brought up. I love the idea, and that's obviously the idea of like mutually working together to figure out how is our process going to be, what are we going to do. What are your thoughts on like there seems to be a really big trend of these are my non-negotiables. I have a long list of red flags, and you hit any of them, that's it. We're not talking about it. We're not gonna confer anymore. It's just over. How do you feel about that trend of like the quick to release relationships?
I think it rather depends what the red flags are. If they come under the heading of manipulation, abuse, disrespect of boundaries, any of those, out the door. Absolutely. I suppose I'd quite like to ask you what you were thinking of when you said the red flags. Are those the sort of things you were meaning?
Well, I see that too. Like I agree wholeheartedly. Like there's boundary crossings or manipulation or just, unhealthy behaviors that might be part of the dynamic. I also see things like a red flag is if they don't like to eat this type of food, or if they don't like to communicate in this way or that way, or maybe they don't show their love in affection. They only like to show their love in gifts, right? But that's the red flag. They're like, nope, I don't like that kind of person. I'm not going to bother trying to get to know that or navigate that difference.
I think it's really important for each person to make that decision themselves, because how important is it for you to be having physical affection? Recently was working with a woman that wasn't part of her relationship after they'd had their children. And it really, really hurt her to the point where she was nearly burned out trying to keep the relationship going, sort of at her physical and emotional cost. And it was fine for her partner. He was fine with it. And he kept doing all of the other winning things. But because that wasn't there at the core, she didn't feel loved. If you don't feel loved, I mean, it's quite hard to go around that dog leg. Right. Yes, he gave me the red flowers at Valentine's Day. Yes, he provides everything for the children. Yes, he takes care of all of the household finances, all of that things. But I just feel like I'm not really here. Then, that's a red flag the size of the White House, isn't it?
That takes a lot of self-awareness, though, right? Like to know, like, oh, it's even the differentiation of like what love makes me feel fulfilled versus, because like for that in that example, the partner, that might be how he just shows love, like doing all these acts of service, right? And that's how he's like, oh, this is exactly how I demonstrate and show that I really care for you. And so, how do you help people build that self-awareness, or how can someone build that self-awareness of what they really want and need?
There's a really simple quiz called the 5 Love Languages quiz that you can do, and it gives you very straightforward ideas. And what I would also say is it's better to catch it at the beginning. So if you do see somebody and they want to give you gifts, okay, you could say that could be love bombing, but they want to give you gifts, they want to do everything for you, but you don't really feel that you can talk to them, you can't be yourself with them, then that is a red flag. You don't want to be finding that out 20 years down the line because you thought, well, he's nice, she's nice, there's not a mean bone in their body, but, there's not a meeting of heart and soul either. You want to be finding that out after 2 or 3 dates.
Yeah, early on, I think that makes sense for sure. And when we talk about these types of conversations, what are the skills that are really helpful? Because these are really personal conversations with somebody, and they like have high stakes because it's like, our future. We feel like our future's on the line here. So what are the skills you recommend, or the tactics you recommend for people to navigate these conversations well?
I think really initially in the first dates, you sort of explore what each of your values are, what's important to you.
Hmm.
There's always a balance between having fun and having a job interview, It's difficult.
Right, because it's not a job interview; it's a date.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to be having fun, but you can do it in fun ways. I saw a series called The Split, and there was a follow-up, so a couple of episodes of it, where the woman and the man who had met were playing the game where they said, toast or plain bread? Beach or mountains? Heels or pumps? So
Hmm.
you could get, in a daft way, a low charged way, a sense of who the other person was. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be, great gravitas. But I think exploring the values gently, like who are their heroes, who do they detest?
Hmm.
I mean, it's really a very clear thing. I mean, and it's so divided at the moment, somebody voted for Kamala and somebody voted for Donald, then, there's lots of conflict already going on there. So those sorts of things matter, what your values are. If you're a family person and you want to spend 2 weekends a month with your family, but your prospective partner doesn't have a good relationship with their family, isn't interested in being a family person,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty key. Let's think about some values. Respect, love, trust, honesty, kindness. Those are the ones you need to be looking for. How do they feel about money? How do they feel about their work? How do they feel about family? How do they feel about sex? How do they feel about spirituality? If you're looking for a match where you can be yourself, you need at least half of those, maybe more, to be
Hmm.
in common. Otherwise, it's a lot harder work.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want your relationship to be endurance and negotiation the whole time.
Yeah. That's interesting because when I was younger, I had a friend tell me, well, he was talking to a group. We were as a group. He was talking to us about how good marriage is based upon marrying somebody from the same culture as you, and he wasn't saying the same ethnic race culture necessarily. He was saying somebody with the same or similar worldview and norms, values, and beliefs, kind of like what you're saying, which made sense to me at the time. And so I think it's interesting because I've also, as a therapist, I've obviously worked with couples or people who don't have the same culture as their partner, but by having good communication, they can navigate it as long as they both have a similar value of like, let's talk it out or let's communicate what our values are and how we'll navigate it together. So there is a little bit of negotiation, but you're saying like there might be a point where there might be too much where if you have to negotiate every single thing, that's a lot.
Yeah. The people you're talking about have enough affinity,
Mm.
and that's key. And it can be in the actual attitude. It's not necessarily that you both like dancing or you both like skiing or you both like reading, Although those things can be incredibly powerful. If somebody likes reading and somebody's a sports watcher, if that's going to be what you do every evening, somebody's going to be upset. How you
Right,
spend your
right.
time.
Yeah.
So there needs to be enough difference between you that there's some sand in the oyster to create the pearl, but not so much difference that all you feel is abrasion.
Hmm. Great metaphor. So let's talk about, I guess I'm wondering, let's say there is a couple that's been together, married for a few years now, and now they're like, they haven't had these conversations enough, and they like, they just have been able to get by because one person's just kind of acquiescing in whatever way, or both are. But now things are getting a little more difficult. Like maybe they have kids, maybe life's changed, their life circumstances have changed. Um, how would you best recommend or advise or coach people in these relationships to start having these better conversations and listening to each other?
Yeah. So you have the date night
Mm.
and you work out how to get a babysitter so that the two of you can just be alone. You can't do it with distraction. You can't do it with the TV on. You need to be dedicating the time. It may only need to be 2 hours. And what I like to do is to start it off with appreciations. So it can be gratitude for what's happened this week, which already puts you in a better frame of mind. because you're not looking for everything that went wrong. You're looking for everything that went right. And then a pat on the back for yourself for whatever you've achieved, or things you didn't fall into, or the nice things that have come your way. But generally a pat on the back for something you feel good about. And then appreciate the other person, the things that you've seen, that they've done, or how they've been. So that you both start the next bit of the conversation from a good place. And you need to listen to each other well and validate each other's feelings. So say you've got an issue that's arising about, I don't know, how you parent your kids. You have a big piece of space about each of your feelings about it. I feel when you say this to little Johnny like this. This is what I see in his face. This is how it affects me. And then the other person can say, okay, I see how that affects you. I hadn't seen it from that point of view. Just hearing, not commenting, just hearing, and also reflecting what they've heard to make sure that it's understood, because you might assume something. And you can ask questions, a little bit more information, but not so much that it's the sort of question of, well, why did you react like that then? No, it's a sort of, can you tell me more?
Yeah. Just curiosity, right?
Yeah, curiosity and kindness and openness. And then the other person can have their parts that they say. And so there's a chance that you hear each other's points of view, and you don't, to the best of your ability, you don't judge. I mean, I think when things have really come unstuck, it's quite difficult to get back from. It's like trying to repair an engine when you just filled it with super glue. But, if you can set these sorts of things off at the beginning, the chances are you won't get to that really glued together, immovable log jam of difficulty. So those are the initial things, to really listen to each other and not to make it necessarily any decisions then, but to go away and reflect and come back together and think about it some more. And during that conversation, you might actually explore, particularly in parenting is so powerful, where your feelings came from. How were you treated when you were little? Did your mum shout at you? Did your dad shout at you? Did they shut you outside? Or, any of the things that ancient parenting skills would have done.
Right.
And does it make you feel like that's happening to little John as well? So then you can unpack it a bit more. There's some complex skills there that can be quite sophisticated, which would be to say, okay, do you want to go into that? There's always that asking. Do you want to go into that? How old do you feel? How old do you feel when you see that happening and you're outraged or you're upset? How old do you feel? And what are you believing? And you go through that. What are you believing about yourself, about other people, about the world, about love, about mum, about dad? All right, okay. And so you can separate what's you and then what's really true about this situation. So you're in your triggered world, and then you can see what's really true.
Maybe this is related. Why do you think people have such a hard time listening at the core of it, instead of wanting to jump in, or or taking things personally, or start getting triggered, instead of being curious and open and and kind?
Because we've never been taught these skills. And we're insecure in our egos. We're frightened. So we want to jump in to shut the other person down. Otherwise, we're going to get triggered. And we're going to go into I'm about 4. And my big sister is getting something that I'm not getting. And that makes me feel outraged. And I want you to see me, not her. It could be something as simple as that. So that's why I'm saying that's quite sophisticated. Because it does require a lot of presence of mind not to take it personally. And, I've had a spat with my partner today over leaving lights on, That comes from his childhood, where he was told not to leave lights on. He's gone all parental on me, and I've gone all on you, sort of thing. And we've had to sort of calm ourselves down and come back to it and talk it through. And okay, you went parental, I went infantile. Shall we start that again? Shall I explain to you how long the lights have been on, that they've not been on overnight? I just put them on 2 minutes before, but you came
Yeah.
in at that point and you thought they'd been on overnight. That's where you go. That's where you go. And I can really understand you're worried about the energy costs going up and you want to take care of things. It's not necessarily exactly as I've described, but that's where we go. That's where we go when we get triggered. We get fragile, defensive, retaliatory,
Hmm.
moral high ground,
Yeah.
win lose. Just as an amusing little story, I was at a dinner party a couple of weeks back and there was a man there and his wife wasn't there. And he was just jokingly saying to another friend that I overheard, he said, I finally worked out how to win an argument with my wife. I argue with the same lack of logic that she gives me, and it completely stumps her.
Hmm.
And the guy I was sitting next to was really sweet. And he said, so you think discussing things with her is about winning and losing? And he said, well, yeah. Like, this is a 60-year-old,
Yeah. Yeah.
Never occurred to him that there could be anything about win-win rather than win-lose.
So that's a good segue into thinking about how do you like to help people view conflict if it's not win lose, or it's not even about winning, it's really about how do we work together? How do you help people move and navigate through that conversation?
I think I usually use it as a way of deepening connection. You see it that way. Um, if you possibly can. I mean, we're not talking like this being easy because we're managing our own feelings, somebody else is managing theirs, we're triggered and all of that. But if you can see it and have a structure around it, it stops you getting in the mud in the middle. So I help people create the structures like an intentional discussion. What do we want out of this discussion together? We want to come out with some sort of understanding and a deeper connection together. We want to come out being able to cooperate better. We want to maintain our respect and love for each other throughout. So, that requires you to communicate with helpful language. So it's not judgment, it's not criticism, it's not stonewalling, all of the things that Gottman talks about. It's not that taking the mickey out of somebody. Do you know that phrase? Is that an American phrase? No, it means mocking somebody unkindly. It means listening with respect, listening with love, being open, taking responsibility, honoring your feelings and honoring the other person's feelings, and working towards a win-win.
Which step of that do you find the hardest for people to grasp?
I think actually making the structure, because people just generally go at it hammer and tongs. There aren't that
Yeah.
many relationship skills lessons
Yeah.
about. You don't get taught that at school so much. Some forward-looking schools you might, but not generally. Yeah, so there's not the intentionality. It's like driving without a map, without a sat nav to guide you.
That's one of the things I actually have a course on difficult conversations, and that's like one of the big pieces is talking about the agenda, quote unquote, of a difficult conversation. It's not about like you'll talk about this topic then this topic, but there's actual flow to how a conversation should go that will help it be more successful.
Okay, well, tell me about that then, because that sounds interesting to me. I want your knowledge now, please.
Yeah, I always teach it in the sense of just there's a introduction and there's like very specific things you need to say inside of that to put the other person at ease, reduce that fight or flight or freeze response. And if they are someone that's like, and a lot of times this might be in a work situation, but if they're not feeling empowered or they're feeling less, power than you for whatever dynamic it is, it's facilitating that in a way where you're able to lift them up. So you're making them equal with you, or you're making yourself equal to somebody else if they're higher power than you. Then you go through ground rules, which helps sets the boundaries of what the conversation is and make sure you're talking about the same thing. And then it's just exploring their point of view, explaining your point of view, and then coming up with a collaborative solution together. Like, what are we going to do to move forward? And then it's closing from there and acknowledgement and gratitude for being in the conversation. So a lot of it is just really empowering the other person, emphasizing their choice, but also the confidence to guide the conversation in a way. You're taking control of a conversation essentially, but even though it's a very collaborative process, you're taking control of this process and you're gaining their buy-in each step of the way too.
Yeah. 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 And that's great. Yes. And that's an interesting thing where you've got a power imbalance, particularly in the workplace. Yeah, I can see that. So yeah, I can see the overlaps as well. You know, if that's your agreed intention, that you're equals in the conversation and that you know the parameters of it. Yes, we're here to talk about little John. We're not here to talk about what went on with your parents at the weekend. You know, we're choosing to focus on one particular bit, and we have confidence we can come back to what happened
Mm-hmm.
another time. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, it's really useful.
I'm interested, what do you do in situations, especially because you deal with people who are separating and kind of ending relationships? What do you do when there is no easy outcome? There's no agreement on what the next step should be, or they're never going to see eye to eye on what's happening and what should happen next.
Usually, I get just one person from the couple come to do conscious uncoupling.
Hmm.
I don't usually work with them both. There's usually one person who is willing. I do know some divorce coaches who do the legal side of things or are more versed in the legal side of things who will see both. I prefer just to see one, and generally there is only one that's willing, and that's probably why the relationship has stopped working, because there's one person wants to reflect and take responsibility, and the other person just is entrenched somewhere. And that's sad to see. That's what I do. I've seen some of the work by Terry Real about people who are entrenched and walled off, and I can see that he can really do brilliant stuff with that. But I'm not trained in that, and as I say, I generally only see one person to conscious
Yeah.
uncouple.
Yeah. And that's got to be hard. You're only getting one side of the story. It's hard for you to really know everything that's actually happening.
Absolutely. And who's to know what's actually happening? Yes.
Right. Right.
Even when you see it with the couple actually in front of you, that's only what they're showing you. That's only what they're telling you. I have done couples work in the past, and I just feel like sometimes I've just seen the tip of the iceberg,
Yeah.
and it was all raggedy toothed underneath. You know, I was only just seeing this neat little bulge on the top. I wanted to go back to something you said there. Seeing one person, it's about them, about their intention. If the other person is non-cooperative, then we work on ways that they can take care of themselves and any children involved to the best of their ability, that they're empowered, that they have better boundaries. Because generally they'll have given themselves away, they'll have given power away, they'll have been trying to make it work. And quite often it's, being over responsible, being people pleasing, and they've got to the end of their tether with that and just said enough is enough. That's generally the pattern of what I see. So they tend towards the empathic side,
Yeah.
the reflectors, rather than the narcissistic side, which is I am all important, you must take care of me. When you get two of those together in a marriage, that can work for a long, long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
Until the people pleaser wakes up or it gets so worn down that they say no more.
I want to go back to the triggers aspect because I think that's an important thing. And for any of our listeners, outside of going to a therapist or even a coach, I think to understand what your triggers are, what are some things that people can do to understand their triggers and why things are triggering them?
I think you generally know you're triggered if you feel like you're absolutely right. You're emphatic, It's outrageous that you should tell me to switch the lights off. Who do you think you are? That's me and little me being a rebel 7-year-old or whatever.
Yeah.
Being reactive rather than responsive, not explaining, just emotionally slapping back. So there's the sense of feeling slapped and slapping back. Not something you want to be negotiating at all, either physically or emotionally. So you're really convinced that your view of the world is absolutely right and there's no gainsaying it. And by the time you've got there, the blood will have gone to the back of your head. You're in your fight and flight, which is why you're feeling so feisty, sometimes crushed, which will be the flight part, and you just want to get out of the room or just give way beyond belief and allow the other people to superpower over you. But if even then you're convinced that you're right, that you're a bad person and they've got all the knowledge and, you're useless and worthless, that's still a trigger. And it's taking you back to those old beliefs that you may not even be aware of, that you've had in reaction to the child care you've been given when you were young.
I think that's such a simple way of looking at it. And I think what I appreciate about it is you're not describing whether their point of view is right or wrong. It doesn't even matter if it's right or wrong. You might be 100% right that the other person should not be doing this behavior, but it is just being more aware that it's bringing up something that's beyond your consciousness in the moment.
Indeed. Indeed. And these things, they do come up very easily when we're tired or we're hungry. There's that thing that people talk about being hangry when you come home at the end of the day and you're hungry and cross. It's the thing like give the kids something to be going on with, whatever. Just to sort of stop those trigger points from happening.
Easier said than done. Are there quick go-tos that you love to get people to slow down in the moment when they feel that rush of adrenaline or anger?
I think when you're in it yourself, it's really quite hard. But you can sometimes notice I'm being unreasonable here, I'm being childlike here. Quite often, if the two of you have worked out what the triggers are, then the other person can say, it's okay, I realise I've triggered you. Let's just talk this through. Maybe if you want to take a bit of space because I can see you're highly charged. And when your blood's in the back of your head, you're not in the thinking part of your brain. So you're reptilian, essentially. So wait till you're calm.
Yeah. When I used to work in a residential treatment facility, they teach us verbal and physical de-escalation skills. And one of the things that's hammered home is we're our stupidest when we're at our angriest, because we're just not thinking about what's happening.
No, an image flashed through my mind. I was thinking about if you see a dog under threat, I'm a dog owner and you can see them, they'll choose, they're feeling under threat. It may be just that it's a bouncy dog that's over friendly and they'll choose if they run away or they fight or they just roll over. And that's what we do too. And we're not thinking,
That's
we're
right.
just in safety mode. What's the best thing to manage this situation? Yeah.
Heather, if somebody were to randomly just fast forward through this podcast episode and just stop at this point, and they missed everything we just talked about for the last 40 minutes, what are the 1 to 2 big takeaways that you would hope that they would think about?
Really learn to listen to yourself so you know what your feelings and needs are. And really learn to listen to your partner so you know what their feelings and needs are. And that's 2. Sorry, I'm going to give you a 3rd.
It's okay.
Do the love languages quiz.
Yeah. We'll link that in the show notes because I think you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what blew my mind about the love languages is that the way we receive love may not be the same way we naturally want to give love. And so that blew my mind. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yes, not a mirror image.
Yeah. So thoughtful. So, Heather, let's say somebody heard this and they're like, I need to work with Heather. I want to get in touch with her or just follow her stuff. How can people find you and connect with you and talk to you more?
Well, I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and all of those things. My website is www.heathergarbutt.com. You can find me there. Or you can email me directly at heather@heathergarbutt.com and I will respond to you.
Awesome. Heather, it was so great talking to you and chatting with you and talking shop, as it were, about this stuff. Thanks for being on our show today.
It's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much.
And for our listeners, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes. You can follow Heather. You can catch up with her in the show notes. So if you're interested in talking more about it with her, if you're in the workplace and you're trying to figure out how to navigate these difficult relationships and conversations, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll have my stuff in the show notes as well. And we'll see you next week.